Good, very late evening. I actually started this video about 3 hours ago and ended up taking a nap. So it's going to get up much later than I thought. Anyway, a few hours after I woke up, after running errands and doing some housework, etc., ad nauseum, I was going through some news feeds and found an article where Muncie, Indiana Mayor Dennis Tyler was arrested by the FBI earlier today for federal charges of taking government money, which is local. And this brought back memories of other corrupt politicians. Now, I grew up in Yorktown, Indiana, which is a suburb of Muncie, Indiana. So I am very much aware of corrupt Muncie politicians. Yes, I was a political junkie starting from about 10 years old. Now, the investigation against the current mayor of Muncie started a little less than 4 years ago. He's about at the end of his second term. He did not run for election, and a member of the opposite party will be mayor starting in January. But during the investigation, there were other members of his administration that were arrested and have been convicted of political corruption crimes. At one point during the investigation, he called in the chief of the Muncie Police and demanded he start his own investigation. The chief of the Muncie Police declined to do so because he thought it would interfere with the federal investigation. The mayor is looking at 10 years in federal prison. His trial, although right now is scheduled to start in January, probably won't start for another year. That will occur in the federal courthouse in Indianapolis, which is the same courthouse where Jared from Subway had his trial. Like I said, I saw this story and realized, wow, there's more I can tell about this story. Now, as I said, I grew up in that area, and except for 1 year, basically, for the last 30 years, except for 1 year, I've lived out of the Muncie area. But yeah, I'm still very familiar with the corruption of Muncie politics. Back in the late 80s, when Mayor James Carey became mayor, I attended an event and met him. He's very nice, very personal, and everybody liked him. But Mayor Carey was a former high-ranking Muncie police official and former elected sheriff of Delaware County, who became mayor. He was corrupt almost from the day he became a police officer. He basically used his position as a police officer, high-ranking police official, and sheriff to gather dirt on everybody in Muncie politics. So yeah, that's one reason he was never charged with corruption, because everybody knew if they testified against Mayor Carey or Sheriff Carey at the time, they were going down too. So, ironically, he was actually a decent mayor. He instituted many building projects in downtown Muncie, but trust me, he was getting kickbacks from that. Later on, Anyway, after I thought about this, I flashed back to my 7th grade history class. I was 12 years old at the time, and my teacher, his brother was a city councilman in Muncie, and he indirectly mentioned, and this took me 30 years to process, that his brother was corrupt even as a lowly member of the city council. Which brings me to two federal corrupt officials in the United States. Yeah, this is a very long journey. The first one is J. Edgar Hoover. J. Edgar Hoover was the head of the FBI from 1924 until his death in 1972. The position of the FBI director is a political position. Normally, the president will appoint the candidate, and Congress will approve or disapprove of it. And in about 99% of the cases, Congress will approve the selections made by the sitting president. So, for him to have been in office for 48 years is highly irregular. Now, J. Edgar Hoover, the thing most people know about him is that he led the FBI during the Great Depression, during the bank robbery gang era, and was he dressed in women's clothes. Even though that's probably the second most known fact about him, I don't think most people even realize that. Personally, I don't care about that. I care about the fact he was very, very corrupt. And one of the most corrupt things he did was during the Great Depression, during the bank robbery era. The top three bank robbery gangs was John Dillinger, who we've discussed before, Pretty Boy Floyd, and Bonnie and Clyde. And yes, they were killing people during their bank robberies, many people who deserve to be remembered and respected. But the FBI, and technically these were not federal crimes at the time. These were local crimes. But local police were overwhelmed, and the FBI was stepping in to help. The newspapers and radio media of the day, and that's all you had in the 1930s, were very highly critical. So, since they could not find ways to arrest these people without killing them, they decided to murder these people. John Dillinger was murdered outside of a movie theater. Bonnie and Clyde were murdered on a lonely country road. And there was a movie, I think it was in 1968, called Bonnie and Clyde. It's a classic. And the end of the movie shows just how brutally these two individuals were murdered. Now, let's face it. If they had been arrested and tried fairly, they would have been convicted and received the death penalty and been legally executed, which is a huge difference between being murdered in the street. So, yeah, J. Edgar Hoover, highly corrupt in many ways, more than one. But I think, in many ways, the most corrupt federal politician in United States history, and this is a close second to J. Edgar Hoover, was President Lyndon Baines Johnson. He was the vice president when President John F. Kennedy was assassinated. Now, President Kennedy had many social programs that he wanted to push through, and basically Congress didn't want to hear it. John F. Kennedy was a Democrat, but he was a Northern Democrat, and most Democrats in that era were from the South. But LBJ was also from the South. He had been many years in Congress and the Senate. He used that time to collect dirt on all of his colleagues. And it was that dirt that enabled him to push through JFK's programs. which was a very popular thing for him to do because even though at the time President Kennedy was only a moderately popular president, his assassination has propelled him into presidential superstardom. So yeah, he got all those programs pushed through. And honestly, if it were not for the Vietnam War, President Johnson would probably be remembered as one of the top 10 greatest presidents in the United States. Even above JFK, who everybody in the United States loves. Mainly because he was young and good looking. His wife was even better looking. And his kids were even better looking. Okay, so we have traveled from small town Muncie, Indiana, approximately 60,000 residents, to United States political corruption. Like I said, not my usual video, but I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you very much.